Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Lifeline Magic Arena starter deck. We'll be upgrading the deck in two stages. First I'll show you how you can upgrade the deck with only commons and uncommons, and then I'll show you the rares and mythics you can use if you have a few extra wild cards. So as always, as I say in these videos, do spend those wisely as they are difficult to obtain. We have very good news with this deck, guys. With Lifeline, it is built around a well-established archetype, and that is Selesnya Life Gain. This is something that's already being played quite a bit in Standard, so we actually have a very strong deck that we can upgrade into. But basically this deck has, it has Prosperous Innkeeper, it has Core Celebrant. These gain life every single time we play creatures, and then we have payoffs like Trelasara, Celestial Unicorn, Righteous Valkyrie. All of these just get more and more powerful as we gain life. And if you play Standard a lot, you've probably played against an actual built version of this. This is like a pretty well established, not a tier 1 deck, but a deck that you do see quite a bit. But the problem with this starter deck is, as with many of these starter decks, it's just watered down. There's too many like off-theme cards that are kind of bad, like You Meet in a Tavern, Pillar Drop Rescuer. These are just kind of whatever. Like, they don't fit with the theme. They water the deck down. You draw them too much and then your deck just doesn't work. So not great. And there's even like good cards that are off theme, like Icing Death and Drizzt are kind of amazing. These are actually really good cards. They just don't fit with the theme, so they make the deck inconsistent. Like, sometimes you just can't gain life because you keep drawing all these cards that are good, just they don't gain life and the deck just doesn't really work. So we could fix that. So let's get started. First off, I want to take out 2 Story Seekers for 2 Prosperous Innkeepers. So the Story Seekers are meant to be a constant source of life gain, right? You attack with it, you gain 2, you attack with it, you gain 2. The problem is, well, you need to attack with it. And the problem with that is it's just not reliable, because if it gets blocked once, it just dies and now you lose your life gain source. So not great. Prosperous Innkeeper, on the other hand, it just sits on the battlefield and gains you life for the rest of the game, and that's really what you want in this deck. You want something that can sit there and gain you life every turn, so your payoffs can just go out of control. So much better. It actually works. It does what we want to do. Next, I want to take out 2 You Meet in a Taverns for 2 Trelasaras. So this card is amazing. Not only do you get a counter every single time you gain life, but you get to scry, and that's huge. It's huge being able to look at your top card and say, do I want this or not? Being able to put extra lands to the bottom is fantastic, and it's just really good. And I will say that normally you just never play 4 copies of Legend. It's sort of a rule. I'd say it's a rule that's true like 70% of the time, and this is the 30% of the time where I'm perfectly happy playing a 4th copy of the Legend, just because it's so useful. It's one of our main win conditions. Our opponents are really gonna want to kill it, so it's gonna get hit with a removal spell like every time we cast it. Plus, all the scrying can let us put extra copies to the bottom if we already have too many of them. So it's good. 4 of them. I want 4 of them. Next, we'll take out an Accomplished Alchemist for a 4th Celestial Unicorn. The Unicorn is one of our main win conditions. If you've ever played against this deck, you've probably seen like a 10 power or a 20 power Unicorn. It could just soak up tons and tons of counters. And the Alchemist is fine. It does give us a life gain source, but we don't really have anything to ramp into. We're not like ramping into 7, 8, 10 drops or whatever. So the mana ramp isn't that exciting, and the life gain's nice, but the Unicorn will win us games, many games. It'll win us most of our games, so we want that. Next, I want to take out 1 Minimus Containment and 1 Devouring Tendrils for 2 Priest of Ancient Lore. So I actually think this deck had too much removal. It had like 6 or 7 removal spells, which I think is actually a little bit too high for this deck. We are like a really synergistic deck. We want our deck to just do its thing and always do its thing. So I still want removal in the deck. That's why I'm only taking out 1 of each. I'm still going to be keeping some of these in the deck, but I think we can reduce the number just a little bit and just get some extra life gain, and the card draw is nice as well, so worth it. I also want to take out Revitalize for a 3rd Priest of Ancient Lores. So both of these do similar things, right? They're 1 card, they let us draw a card, and they give us a single life gain trigger. The difference is the Priest will also trigger all of our other creatures like Prosperous Innkeeper and Core Celebrant, and that can add up to a lot of life and scrying. And if we have, like the Cleric class in play, that can also just add so much, multiple instances of gaining an extra point point of life, so we can actually add up to more life, and you know, they're very similar anyway, so I think this is a worthwhile change. Speaking of cleric class though, I also want to take out another revitalize for another one of those. Revitalize is fine, but cleric class is like one of our main win conditions, one of our many win conditions. There's a lot of win conditions in this deck, especially after we level it up once, right? Once we level it up, it starts dishing out a counter every time we gain life, which again could just get out of hand. It just makes huge creatures, so definitely worth it. The revitalize, fine, but I just want more cleric class because it will win us games. Next, I want to take out 2 fortifying droughts for 2 Lunarch veterans. So these are basically just like the innkeepers. They gain a life whenever we play a creature, which means we have 3 different creatures that can have this effect. And I like them more than the droughts just because they're a constant stream of life throughout the game instead of a one-time life gain spell, right? So sure, the drought, it has the pumping effect, but I find more often than not, once this deck gets going, our creatures are usually bigger than our opponents anyway, so the pumping isn't as necessary, and Lunarch Veteran helps us get to that point faster anyway, so I just think Lunarch Veteran makes more sense here. One final change I want to make to the budget deck is I want to replace a single forest for a Skyclave Cleric. So this is just a land. It also fixes the color issue. I think we had too many forests and we needed more plains. So we're basically switching a forest into a plains, but this plains can also be played as a cleric that gains life. Ideally, we're going to play this as a land. This is a land in the deck, but if we're flooded, it's a creature, gains life, on theme. Perfectly happy to have a single copy. And that's it for the budget deck. We actually changed a lot, but we should definitely be a lot more focused compared to where we started. We just got a lot of that filler stuff out of the deck that was just clogging the deck up and, you know, making some of our hands just not really work. Though we do still have a few off-theme cards. We still have Pillar Drop Rescuer in the deck. So we're going to be addressing that in the non-budget version. Though if you're playing on a budget and you really want to get those Pillar Drop Rescuers out, because I think they're kind of bad, just adding more Lunarch Veterans and Cleric classes would be ideal, so definitely consider that. So anyway, on to the rares and mythics. Let's take out those 2 Pillar Drop Rescuers in favor of 2 Angel of Destiny. While the Rescuers are like occasionally decent, like every once in a while, it's really good because you can get back a Trellisar or whatever, but 9 times out of 10 it just feels clunky and useless. Whereas the Angel can often just give us free wins. We automatically win the game if we have 35 life, and we frequently do, so that's totally fine. Perfectly happy to just, you know, win games if our opponent is making things difficult. Next I want to take out 2 Devouring Tendrils for 2 Inscription of Abundance. So this is sort of optional, as the inscription isn't strictly better. There are times when the tendrils will be better since it's not a fight spell, right? It's a deal damage to a creature based on a creature's power. So sometimes the inscription, like, you'll lose the creature because it's a fight mechanic instead of a deal damage thing. But while it is sometimes a little bit worse, in the late game the inscription is just amazing. It leads to massive blowouts because you can kick it for 5 and then you get all of the effects. All of them, you get counters, you get the fight, you gain a bunch of lives, so slightly, maybe a little bit worse on turn 2 specifically, although that's just comparing the fight mechanic. We also have all the other stuff, right? So it's worse on turn 2, specifically if you need a fight spell, but it's better in like every other scenario basically. So generally better, but optional, I guess, whatever. Next I want to take out Icing Death for Righteous Valkyrie. Once again, I guess this is sort of optional because Icing Death is a solid beater, but it's just not on theme. It doesn't work with our life gain stuff, so sometimes it feels a little clunky, although it's a 4-mana 4/3 flyer, so it never feels too clunky. But the Valkyrie is just a little bit more on theme. It gives us another source of life gain, and if we have a bunch of life, which we usually do, it pumps our entire board, which is definitely very powerful in this deck. So for the same reason, I want to take out a Drizzt for a 3rd Valkyrie. Once again, much like Icing Death, Drizzt is awesome. If you enjoy it, feel free to keep it. It does work really well with like Prosperous Innkeeper and whatnot, right? Because you get multiple creatures, you get multiple triggers and whatnot. But the Valkyrie will just be really good in this deck. It will win games, so it's typically played in most life gain decks. I think it's better than Drizzt, but if you really like Drizzt, it's kind of fine. We can also improve the mana base by replacing 4 Arctic tree lines for 4 overgrown farmlands. While the farmlands do sometimes enter tapped, the tree lines always enter tapped, so it's an improvement, right? It's all upside. And you can also take out 3 basics for 3 pathways, because, you know, you can either draw a forest or a plains, or you can have a pathway and basically draw both, you know, whichever one you need. So generally better. It's optional, but you can also take out a basic for the white creature land from Forgotten Realms, because, you know, it animates into a flying dragon. You know, it enters tapped in the late game, but remember, people seem to forget sometimes that these do enter untapped in the first couple turns. But you know, it's useful against control decks with board sweepers, just because it kind of acts as a finisher. Their board sweepers can't usually hit this, so yeah, it's not the worst thing to have like one of those in the deck. And that's it. That is the deck. What we have now is definitely so much better than what we started with. There are still a few minor things I'm not happy with. I would prefer to be playing 4 copies each of Lunarch Veteran and Cleric class, and maybe we could take out like the Lurking Ropers, right? The Lurking Ropers, they're really good against mono green Stompies specifically, because they brick walled all their threats, right? Their Werewolf Pack Leader, their Troll, their 4/4 Troll, the 4/5 just sits there and makes mono green Stompy just not do anything. So it is very useful in that matchup. That's why best of 3 is so nice, because you can just play the Ropers in the sideboard. But it would be nice to have 4 Lunarch Veterans and 4 Cleric classes, so maybe the Ropers can go for those. That's really optional, really. That's why I didn't add it. Regardless, guys, regardless of that, the deck we have now is very solid. Hopefully you agree. Let me know if you've tried this. The deck should work. It should do what it's supposed to do more often. And, you know, you shouldn't have so many clunky hands that don't do anything, because we just got rid of all that filler crap that wasn't doing anything for us. But if that was helpful, guys, definitely leave a like, consider subscribing for more, as I am upgrading all 10 of the starter decks. There's a playlist dedicated to all the starter decks, so I will leave a link to that in the description, and there will also be a link on the end screen that you're about to see. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.